I was going to start promptly at 1, but I'm going to give people a couple more minutes to join, and then we'll go ahead and get started.
So Sandy, I love your DataFest background. I have my very authentic, messy office background. It's not my real office. It's my just authentic look. I'm kidding. It is my real office.
It does not look messy in the slightest bit.
That's because I'm like hiding my desk.
Well, it looks there was a call that we've been having with the study abroad group, and there's one guy, he always has this background of all of these books. And I didn't notice it because he didn't must move much, so you don't see like that weird fuzziness and the disappearing hand. And finally, I just said, "Oh, is that your office?" He's like, "No, this is a virtual background." But normally it was just this white wall that he was sitting in front of. But I thought, oh, it was such a nice background.
Yeah, a good friend of mine actually bought a green screen for his home, and he puts these like beautiful home backgrounds up, and it looks so real because he's got a really nice green screen and a really good camera. And I'm on these research meetings with him in these gorgeous homes, and it looks like he's sitting in this beautiful place.
Well, Carrie Monty from Cleveland Clinic, Mike's on here, I see. We were on a call with them one time, and Ryan Elias was complimenting her on her home and how great it looked. And it was like a loft sort of apartment. He's like, "I didn't realize." And she's like, "That's a virtual background." God, so hard to tell anymore. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get us started because we have a great group here with us today. Our agenda for this session, we're going to have the R in Python, not an either or. Why is it important that it's an and conversation? Why is it important that our organizations think about educating and upskilling our talent and providing the opportunities for whether that be the students or those out in the workforce having access to R and Python. So we're going to talk a bit about that debate, and we have a panel of speakers here, which I'll introduce in just a second. And I'm gonna I have each of them will spend a little bit of time talking about themselves and their opinions, thoughts on this debate, and then we'll move on to opening up to questions for everyone here in the audience. I have some questions in case there aren't any coming from the group, and then we will move on. I will tell our lovely panelists that they can drop if they'd like after the conversation, and we will give you all a quick update on the successes of Cads this past semester and where we would like to ask for support from you all next academic year. Without further ado, I put out a call actually on LinkedIn. I thought it would be really nice if we had a discussion around, we're always trying to bring relevant topics to our board meetings. And I kept seeing R versus Python everywhere and this debate going on. And I'm a firm believer in that it's not an either or, it's a both. It's an and conversation. And so I had just put out there, hey, I'd love to have some people come talk at our board meeting for Cads about R and Python. It was overwhelming response that I got from people I didn't even know, which is actually going to be a part of this panel right now. I think you should talk to Boyan was one of them. He should be on your panel. He's in Germany, everybody. So we've got we're a global board meeting right now. But that's how I actually came to know some of the people that we're going to talk through here. Is just they were referred to me by others, and I had a whole overwhelming response to participate in this conversation. Katie Schaefer, she is now at Beam Dental. I know Katie, she's the manager of advanced analytics at Beam, but I met her actually several years ago for the Women in Analytics conference in Columbus. I was one of their speakers, and ever since then we've stayed in contact. So I knew that she was avid in the R world. So I reached out to her to see if she'd have any interest, and also knowing that she's been using open source programming languages for a while. And then she said, I think you need to talk to Kelly O'Brien from our studio. Well, yes, she works for our studio. She is absolutely able to talk about the benefits of having access to both and the integration of Python and R or R in Python. Boyan Hangelov, as I've mentioned, he was referred to me on LinkedIn, and so we've had a couple of conversations, and he has a real passion around this topic. He's a senior data scientist at Dane Studios. Honestly, when we first started talking, and then he said that you're in Germany, right? I was like, I am honored that you would want to participate in this and be a part of this conversation with us. So he's been helping us to spread the word on LinkedIn as well. He's had some posts out there. And then Derek Sastov, that we have on here on our call as well. He's with Amend Consulting, a senior data scientist. I came to know Derek by an old colleague of mine who went to Amend, and Amend is extremely interested in continuing to collaborate and partner with Cads next academic year. We're actually putting a lot with you all on the calendar for events that you'd like to sponsor. So I'm going to turn it over to each of them. Katie, I'll have you start first. If you would like to give a little introduction about yourself and then your thoughts on this debate. And then I'll move on to Kelly, Boyan, and then Derek.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be on the panel. So a little bit of background on me. I started off on my data science journey in academia, as many did before there were great analytics and data science programs. So I got my PhD from OSU in experimental and quantitative psych. Throughout my PhD program, I used a lot of SAS, and then towards the end started using R as well when I started to get into industry, as we called it at the time, at Nationwide Insurance. So worked at Nationwide Insurance a little bit in their enterprise analytics office, used a lot of R there. Started at a consulting firm called Covale as a data scientist, and then used R executing on projects, developing models, and other assets. So used R a lot in that capacity. Also did a lot with Shiny apps and trying to figure out creative ways to get them to clients in kind of a consulting setting, where, you know, people sometimes even had issues installing R, for example, or there wasn't the infrastructure set up. And then within my time at Covale, kind of moved into more of a leadership role, and then transferred that over into my new role at Beam Dental. So at Beam, I oversee a team of kind of analysts, so more traditional business insights work. So there's a lot of Tableau and SQL floating around, and we're kind of starting our journey of building out data science here at Beam. And so we're working a lot, me and the head of data management, kind of thinking of how to set ourselves up for success there and to set up ourselves up for kind of building the foundation of potentially a multilingual team where we could hire talent that is well versed in either R or Python. So the foundations today at Beam are more in Python. From a skill set perspective, just given kind of some more traditional data or computer science backgrounds in the data management side. So bringing R into the mix, and happy to talk about what that looks like for a team that's kind of just starting their journey, and kind of also my use of R in my prior roles.
I'm muted. Thank you, Katie. All right, Kelly, we'll move on to you.
Thanks, Sandy. Hey, I'm Kelly. I work for our studio as now a product owner for one of our professional products called our Studio Connect. But prior to that, I spent a few years on the solutions engineering group doing work where I primarily reached out to customers who were trying to make decisions around things like R or Python or both, and work with their IT groups to establish what their analytic infrastructure would look like inside of organizations and understand how they needed to grow as a data science team to develop the credibility within their organization to put things into production. So I really enjoy those types of conversations, thinking about R from the perspective of our studio being like historically very based in R, and how to think about and define production when you're doing data science in R versus data science that gets passed off to software engineering or to an IT ops group. And over the course of the last few years of working at our studio, we have learned that it's become more and more important to provide tools for those hybrid teams, tools for teams who want to, you know, as Katie just said, attract talent in both languages. So we have shifted our focus to creating products that serve that hybrid team model. And I'm really interested in, you know, getting people excited about being language agnostic and working together as teams where you can have really great folks working in both languages, or even folks who work in both languages on a day-to-day basis, chopping up a project and doing portions of it in the language that makes the most sense to apply. So that's what I do as a product owner for our Studio Connect. We create tools that will serve both R and Python data science artifacts. And I'm excited to talk about more of what that means, if that's interesting to folks today.
Thank you, Kelly. Boyan, let's move over to you.
Yes, so hello from Germany, from Berlin, where it's evening right now, probably with all of you earlier in the day. Yeah, so I'm Boyan, and my journey actually started a long time ago in the R world. So I did bioinformatics, and that was a field more dominated by that language. And after this, I went to industry, where I learned a lot of Python, and I worked mostly as a data scientist. I did all kinds of startup jobs, quite a few of them, and I saw all kinds of data projects, which I think gives me an interesting perspective on the languages. And most recently, I started to work more on data strategy, and that gives me an additional perspective, because my job now is mostly to help our clients choose the best tools. And I have a very perhaps surprising insights from industry, maybe on the European side. So I'm not sure about the US, but at least from Europe, I can give you some good insights. And this topic for me is a really big deal. So much so that I decided to write a book on it. And I did it with O'Reilly Media. And the book is called Python and R for the Modern Data Scientist. And I think you can deduce my opinion about both languages, because, I mean, the book is about both. And in that book, I mean, we try to make a very strong case for how they're used, why, what are the benefits. So I'm very interested in what we discussed today.
Thank you, Boyan. When I met with Boyan and we had a conversation about this panel, and we were talking about it, so there's this R versus Python debate. And I mentioned to him that Katie and Kelly were already on board, and he said, Sandy, you don't have much of a debate planned here. And I said, well, I don't think it needs to be a debate. I actually think this needs to just be a conversation and encouragement on both sides. And he said, it might be helpful, though, if you did get somebody who might be a little bit more of a Python guy. And that's Derek's a bit more of a role here on our panel as well. He came to us with in high regard from a former colleague. So Derek, why don't you take it away and introduce yourself?
Sure. It's hard to follow the guy that actually wrote the book on the topic, but I'll do my best. Yeah, so my name is Derek Sastov. A little bit of background on me. I studied industrial engineering at Ohio State. There are any other Buckeyes on the call here. I spent a lot of time in the Columbus analytics community and worked to get to know the people in that space. Since graduating, I've spent the last 4 years at a MEN Consulting, or a management consulting shop based in Cincinnati, working primarily with middle market clients here in the Midwest. So at a MEN, we use both R and Python in kind of an even balance, but I would say outside of a MEN, I've also spent the last 5 years or so teaching data science courses at MBA programs and CFA societies, where we generally use Python as the medium there. So teaching non-technical folks how to apply regression, classification, machine learning, time series analysis. We generally use Python as the medium to do so. Yeah, in terms of my stance on the R versus Python debate, I mentioned I definitely use both. As a quick tangent, I would say the tool I use most is SQL, and I wish that more analysts that joined the team had SQL backgrounds. I think that's probably the most critical tool within data science, in my opinion, but it's a discussion for a different time. Yeah, and I would say just generally my rule of thumb for when I use R versus Python has been some clients will come to us and ask for this quick ad hoc answering a specific question. Like last year, I worked on a project where a software company asked us, what is the biggest driver of churn for our clients this past couple of years? And we're trying to answer a certain question. I'll generally use R for some of those ad hoc data analysis. But oftentimes clients will ask us to build out more robust machine learning or data engineering pipelines and deploying those tools to production. And I'll often use Python for those kinds of use cases. And I'm happy to talk more about the details of those projects that I've worked on and some of the nuance between R and Python and why I choose either or, but definitely agree with Sandy and everyone else here that's it's helpful to understand both.
I'm going to kick us off first with a question that I've been hearing this a lot, and I'd like to just get your thoughts on the topic. I actually attended, I think it was last summer, there was a virtual, everything was virtual, right? Discussion about the R versus Python, and how both sides of the topic were represented, and they were talking about how these worlds need to come together more. And so the thing that I've been hearing, though, is around the idea of, well, R is dying, it's going away, everything needs to move to Python. How much truth do you see in any of that? I know Kelly's going to probably say, well, that's not true because I work on it every single day. But like, let's hear from each of your individual perspectives on why perhaps that phrasing that needs to go away, that mentality.
Yeah, maybe I could say to that, because I mean, that's the last thing which I mentioned was this insight from industry, which might be a bit surprising. And the insight is there's some fields from some of my clients, right? Because I maybe didn't mention working management consultancy, right? So most of the clients they come from all kinds of domains. So you have some for example, like pharma. I mean, in their case, R is as strong as ever. So perhaps that's something surprising, because when I wanted to become a data scientist, I really had the same question in front of me. Do I learn R or Python? What do I do? Because I knew only R. And then I had this view, okay, maybe you read blogs, and somehow in that time, it was like 10 years ago, the conversation started to switch to Python. But this bias towards R is dying, R is old, it's just completely not true. I mean, I see it with my clients that they are completely R-based shops. So in finance and pharma, I would say, and bioinformatics. But we can assume that bioinformatics is a bit more of a niche field. But in the case for finance and pharma, our clients just do R. Like almost 100%. And it's not because, one could argue they do it because of legacy systems, like they just did it all the time like this. But to be honest, a lot of the more advanced statistical things, they're just made for R. And some specifics which they use, they're really just available in R. And I don't see any time in the future that in those cases it will be displaced by Python. So that was a bit of a surprising thing to me to see. So in industry, you really have this split by domain. So yeah, these are kind of my 2 cents on that one.
Yeah, I can add to that. I would say at Amend, we're definitely moving more and more towards Python, just because we're doing more data engineering work and deploying pipelines and models for our clients. But I would say, I think Katie mentioned a little bit already, but I think at Amend, it's important for us to not pigeonhole ourselves into just Python. In our job descriptions, we don't include, actually we can include both Python, R, SQL, Java, whatever else. We don't want to limit who we hire based off of what they might have happened to use in the past. Because I have a lot of strong people in stats or academics or certain fields like Boyan mentioned, they will probably have a lot to add to a consulting world that we're working in. So we try not to limit ourselves, especially in the hiring and talent part of this.
Yeah, I think from a hiring perspective, it's just so hard to find just good people in general, especially those that are, extremely competent in statistics and solving problems and breaking those down, that I think you're really limiting yourself if you just focus on one language or the other. I think some of the sentiment around like R is dead or dying, I think a lot of it's probably perpetuated from people from an opposing camps of either side, right? Who are used to what they know. I think something that I've experienced, which I would think most of the panelists would agree, it tends to be that I think folks with more of a statistics background, academic background, traditionally align with R. Folks with more of a computer science background traditionally align with Python a little bit more strongly. So I think some of the perceived, but I don't think real challenge with R is putting it into production and not scaling. I think a lot of those are really missed, but I think some of the challenges when you get into an organization are that a lot of times the data engineer, the data management you're working with probably may have not used R. They're more comfortable in Python. But I think that is an important hurdle to get past organizationally, because I do think a lot of the ones Derek mentioned are a lot of use cases where R might be the best tool for the job. And it's important to spot those. Like, I can't think of an example off the top of my head, but there are a lot of just specific statistical packages that exist in the R community that are well supported that might not be so out of the box in Python, right? So do you really want to spend that time kind of reinventing the wheel when you could use the right tool for the job? And I'm sure the flip of that is true too. So I think that is, just the challenge. There's the challenge in many things, just the people aspect of it, not so much the technology and the shortcomings of one versus the other, because I think those are relatively limited. And I'm sure Kelly could speak a lot on some of the myths regarding R and how you can get past those, I think, and it's worthwhile to do so.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said so far, especially, boy, the stuff you mentioned about various industries having these this sort of tribal knowledge about what's best, and this kind of stay true across industry bounds. Our studio is in over 7,000 different organizations right now, which I don't say just as a, R is alive. I say because that gives me the opportunity to talk to this vast group of organizations across the world about what they're using, R and Python languages, and this language debate. I mean, it's totally valid. You can watch languages die off. I too have a bioinformatics background. When I started in college, I was told to learn Perl, and so I learned Perl. And then by the time I was done, I was using R and Python, and I never touched Perl again. So this can happen. It can happen to R. It can happen to any other language. We're watching the rise of Julia right now. Is really exciting. But as long as we still see these great thought leaders in the R community, and the vibrancy of the R community, I am not at all threatened by other languages. I think that they add great flavor, and as long as you have that flexibility and that ability to be watching what's on the horizon and reacting to what are the best tools, and you have the confidence to say I really like working in this framework. It brings me joy, versus some other framework is not as exciting to me. I think it's up to you and your team. And I know that's hard to navigate, because you want somebody like Grand to come down from on high and say this is the best, don't use this other language at all. And that's just hard to do, because there's so many trade-offs and in nuance that comes from being in certain industries as well, and what's available to you.
So maybe I actually would like to add something here, because I realized that we discussed that Sandy asked the question if R is dying, and we just discussed it from a perspective of industry, whether it's applied across the world. And I think it's clearly all of us can agree on that, but it has a different angle. Is the language itself dying? I mean, do the language features die? I mean, the fact that it's used, I mean, you can argue very obscure languages like Fortran or Elixir. I mean, they are not dead at all, but they're not popular, right? And I'm sure somebody who is better at R than me would say that R, there's Hadley Wickham, right? I mean, he works at R Studio, right? And he almost single-handedly reinvented the language. I mean, I would say that R, since I started using it, now it's a totally different, beautiful new language. And some things are of the newest developments, let's say tidy models, the tidyverse in general, I mean, they're absolutely breathtaking. I mean, my background is more in machine learning in what I do. And everybody says, even in the book, I made the argument that for some of those things, Python is the way to go. But I have to say, even recently, I saw developments in the R language, which are really, and the packages around it, of course, which make me jealous from the Python perspective. So the language is not dead at all, and it continues to evolve and grow. New versions of it are being released, new packages, and I think it has reinvented itself, I would say, than the R maybe 15 years ago.
Allison?
I have a question. I have lots of questions. I'm going to try not to ask them all. So I'm a professor of business analytics at Miami, and I know some of you, but not all of you. And this is, as you can imagine, a debate that we have continuously in our program. Our program is a little unique in that we have, on our faculty, we have statisticians, We have computer scientists, we have industrial engineers, we have all of these sort of different academic disciplines that and we work together to try to sort of educate the business analyst. And we do this at the undergraduate level and the graduate level. So we do a little of all of the things that you've talked about. And we're really struggling right now with the R versus Python debate. We do them both. And let me just clarify what we do. All of our students take Python when they're freshmen. Then we teach them through our curriculum. These are the students that are our majors. Then we teach them things like regression analysis and intro to data mining in R. And then we move them into more advanced classes like machine learning and big data architecture using Python. And so we sort of have this not seamless blend of the two languages. And thrown in there, we have some SQL and a little Tableau. John Baylor mentioned, Power BI, Tableau, things like that, all sort of intertwined. They don't get a heavy dose of anything, but they get sort of a lot of different things. For those of you, especially that are working in industry and hiring people, how does that sound to you, where they're kind of exposed to different tools? Our focus is really not on the tool, but it's on the methodologies and trying to teach them, good practice in terms of analysis. And the tool is just a way to get the job done.
Allison, I think that's a great question. I mean, the way that at least we've approached it, and I think about it, is that what you hit on is the most important, right? When I started out of college, I was working on ERP systems. JD Edwards, right? No longer around. PeopleSoft, no longer around, right? But the concepts of MRP, the concepts of inventory control, the concepts of, how relational databases and how systems work together is what I learned in school. And that's what propelled me and allowed me to learn, right, different tool sets in different ways and different processes. And I think the same thing applies here. It's understanding the science behind it. It's understanding the concepts. It's understanding how you utilize the tools to get what you want, so that the students are prepared to go and utilize whatever tool set that organization uses. We use a ton of R, right, where we're at. But what we do is we're not looking for R whizzes. We're looking for folks that understand how to do data analytics, right? We're understanding how people can do the different types of concepts that you talked about. And frankly, we understand that we may have to teach them some of the languages. At least from my perspective, I think you guys are thinking about it the right way.
Anybody else have any ideas or feedback on that?
Sure. Hey, Allison, it's Mike Lewis.
Hey, Mike.
How are you? So I would kind of echo that with Brett to some degree. A language is a language. What's more important to us is for students to understand what they're trying to accomplish in the long run, and then find the appropriate tool to get to that end game. So we use SaaS, all kinds of SaaS products at the clinic, as well as all kinds of open source, whether it be R or Python or TensorFlow or whatever the case may be. So we always look, when we evaluate a project or when we evaluate what we're trying to work on, it's always looking at from the beginning to end, how we're going to deploy it to the organization. Is it being put in, like, for example, we work in healthcare, so is it going to be put into our EHR, or is there going to be some dashboard or some workflow kind of mechanism, and how do we do all that? So from our perspective, it's understanding the methodologies. That's the most important thing, and understanding when they're appropriate. And then the second part is then you have the discussion around which tool. And we are not, like I said, we don't just hire R or Python when you come to the clinic. Whatever programming languages you have are fantastic. And we educate and teach the rest of those and give those people the opportunity.
Can I ask one more question on this?
Yes.
I really don't want to dominate, but this is something that's just, we're working so hard to keep our curriculum up to date. And one of the things that we really work hard on with all of our students at all levels is making sure that when they build solutions and analytics, that they build it in a reproducible way. And the tools have gotten, so those of you that have worked on these tools, Kelly, especially at our studio, I mean, it's awesome. They've provided us with so many really good tools to do that, to really enhance the reproducibility of the solutions. We also use Jupyter Notebook. and then there's new stuff coming out. My question, and I was just having a discussion with a group of my graduate students today, the thing that's really kind of missing for us, or at least we're maybe not as aware of in academia, is the ability to have sort of these reproducible documents like a Markdown or a Jupyter notebook in a more interactive way. And I know there's commercial tools like DeepNote coming out, but there's issues with those about data sharing. So I just wanted to open up a question to those of you that are working at high-end in industry. These reproducible data science documents like a Jupyter notebook or an R Markdown that allows the interactivity of like Google Colab or DeepNote, where we have some sense of data privacy. That's a tool that we're really looking, I think, for in academia as we work with company data that we have to keep private. And the ability then to integrate R and Python for different parts of a project would be huge for us in terms of building solutions. And Katie Schaefer's worked with us in one of our practicum classes. And then a lot of you on the call have worked with us on our project team, so you know what I'm talking about. So that's the kind of tools that we're looking for, and I'm just curious as to what's out there on the horizon for that.
Sure. So just from my perspective, Allison, what we do use, Jupyter notebooks, or we're starting to use, GitHub as a repository to make sure code is shareable and scalable. So I think those are the kinds of things that are important to us also. And, we're still trying to figure that out, especially in our industry. We collaborate with a lot of other hospitals, and we've collaborated with SAS on some projects. So we've used, GitHub and stuff to make sure code's shareable, scalable, reusable, well documented, all that kind of stuff. But again, we're in our infancy in getting that started. So we've struggled with a lot of our programmers have certain types of ways they program. So that's the one thing we don't want to do, is kind of stifle someone's innovation on how they program and say, this is how you have to program, and do some of that. So, we're just going to continue to learn. I think that would be some great, conversations for this Cads board, going forward.
So when I think about adding interactivity into like a notebook format, I'm thinking about, in the R world, having an R Markdown with a shiny runtime, or in the Python world, probably would go with Jupyter Notebook plus a framework like Voila. Is that kind of the crux of your question? Are you looking for those types of technologies? You had a separate question about how to keep the data secure, and that's something that's trickier to navigate, because I'm not sure like whether you're asking for open source solutions to that, or because that's something that out of the box our studio offers to organizations, but that's the point at which we ask enterprises to start paying for the tools. So there's a split between what our studio offers for open source, which is like a great getting started framework, and then we have open source server tools, but we don't help you secure that until you start paying for, like, that's where we declare, like, now you're an enterprise, now you need that further level of support, authentication, authorization, and like the full layer of our studio customer success. So, I mean, there are alternatives that exist in the open source world to like build that, what we offer yourself also, but those get more into the realm of like, you're on your own, you're learning Heroku, you're learning like tooling from these cloud providers to stand up these servers and infrastructure to then protect your data. And all of that is doable, but that's what I spend most of my day on, is working on products that out of the box will do that for customers, so that they don't have to worry about all of that and can just pay for it. But that's the crux of it, is like, you need a Python runtime, or you need an R runtime to sit behind your notebook if you want that layer of interactivity. Did that answer your question?
I think you're getting at it. I think what we're really looking for is, how do we need to be educating our students in a way that we're building workflows and
Yeah.
in a way that sort of mimics what's going on in industry. We're building a sandbox for them in the university, and we're trying to do that in a way that when they get out, they're prepared. Right now, we're doing it with Jupyter notebooks, and we're doing it with R Markdown, depending on whether we're teaching a class that's in Jupyter or in Markdown, and trying to teach them, good principles of reproducibility and good principles of documentation. Most of those are not interactive documents, if you will. What's next for that? Because I know there's a lot going on in technology.
I mean, I just wanted to make a comment about teaching, because my impression from data science teaching programs is that sometimes they're very focused on the language and not the tools. And I think this kind of goes in your question. And I realized this while I was writing this book now, because some things actually a Python developer, let's say, really knows how to do, but I don't. And I've done this for 10 years or something. And the idea is I realized that I actually didn't learn the language, I learned the packages. And this was such a weird way to look at teaching data science, because I actually honestly don't know some fundamental things about R, like the S4 classes or Python decorators. Those things I cannot do, but I succeeded as a data scientist for a decade. But I learned the packages, not the language. So I think this kind of makes it more suitable in industry, because in 90% of the cases, you work with open source. So most of the things are already developed, and you kind of learn how to use that in Python. There's the PyData stack, Pandas, scikit-learn, and all of this. And in R is the tidyverse, for example. So you really learn the packages, not the language. So this is another way to think, perhaps, that might be interesting, I think, for this transition to industry, I think.
It's a good point. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a really good call out on the understanding the language versus the packages. And I think that also gets into being like a user versus a creator, which ultimately I think would be an amazing, candidate, right? Anyone who can create in a language and really understands it. I think from an undergraduate training perspective, I think number one is just understanding the methods, right? Like these languages, I don't see them going anytime soon, but they could come and go. But regression is never going to go out of style. Like that will always be a staple we are looking for, and the fundamental understanding of that in a data science role. And also kind of the maybe less tangible how to scope a problem, break it down into smaller pieces and tackle it in an effective manner. So I think focusing on those fundamentals and statistics and problem solving are at the core of what we look for in a hire. Again, depends on the role. Data scientists or analysts might look a little different. I'd say for a data science role, I think a lot of hiring trends I see are agnostic in terms of what language you are proficient in. But I think probably the one risk coming out of an undergraduate program that I've seen is that you have kind of a surface level understanding of every language, but you're not actually deep enough to be really efficient in any of them. So I don't know that it matters whether it's R, Python, or SAS. I'd probably put R and Python at the top of the list, but many other industries might still focus on SAS. But I think that would be the one call out there is like number one is the approaches, the fundamentals and statistics. But number two would be I do look for you can program competently in at least one of those languages that isn't like a point and click SPSS, and making sure they have more than just kind of like a surface level use of that. I don't know that it needs to go all the way as deep as really understanding the nitty gritty, but they should be a pretty competent user of at least one of those.
One more quick note on just the interactivity piece of this. We as consultants, we spend a lot of time trying to get the data in front of the business users. So we use a lot of tools like Tableau and Power BI. And I know that you can embed Python and R scripts into Power BI reports, and I believe Tableau as well. So we'll often do that as a way to get the results of whatever model or script you're running in front of users, is to embed them in BI tools.
Can I ask just a sort of a little bit of a tangential question as a follow-up that ended up related to a point that surfaced in chat when Derek mentioned about some of these tools. And our studio recently had a Code First Data Science webinar and talking about this. And I'm teaching a data viz class now, and we teach it with code. We don't teach it with menu
GUI interface to do this. You know, my belief is that generally if you start with code, you can always move to something that's GUI. If you start with GUI, you don't necessarily know code, and there's lots of reasons for doing it. Can you talk just from the perspective of where you all live about this, the idea of, you know, sort of using some of these, you know, the GUI specification of analyses or visualizations versus some of the code-based applications within your worlds? Thank you.
I mean, I stand with our studios. You saw the webinar. We are big proponents of reproducible data science and taking a code first approach because of the benefits of making, you know, those visualizations reproducible. As far as our integrations with the BI platforms go, though, I think that we don't want to cut ourselves off from that. There are existing integrations into like the RServe for Tableau that are really not adequate today. And from like a data security perspective or from like an RCurl perspective, like they aren't doing a good service, and they're not good representations of what can be done in R when trying to integrate with Tableau and Power BI. And so we're actually working currently right now in conjunction with Tableau specifically to improve that process. And you'll see some new stuff coming from our studio in the next couple months around that.
Yeah. To add on to that, I would say my role as a consultant, maybe Boyan as well, since he's a consultant, it's a little different because I'm building a tool and I have to hand it off to a client that doesn't know how to code. So the code first isn't always an option, at least for us. So that's why we generally like to, if we do any more advanced modeling in Python or R, we try to embed that in a tool that's easy for someone that knows how to use Excel and maybe Microsoft Access as the most advanced thing they know. We have to basically embed those complicated solutions in tools that they can navigate easily and actually want to use and not get overwhelmed by it.
Yeah, I think it just depends on the user and also from a talent perspective on the role you're trying to land. For a data science team, I would always favor, you know, one of the core open source programming languages over Experience with like a, you know, drag and drop GUI sort of language for that reproducibility aspect, number one. But obviously, I think many other perks in terms of the open source community, all the packages available. But if you're, you know, looking to pursue a role as a candidate, maybe on more of a traditional like marketing analyst role or in a various team, maybe the bread and butter, the core of what you have to offer for the job is not necessarily hardcore data science. Maybe a skill set in one of these softer languages would be satisfactory, or being like a Power Excel user. I would still argue even in those roles, there's much to be gained from learning tools like R, which I think can be a softer landing for somebody who doesn't have a computer science background. But at the end of the day, that might not be the number one asset of you as a candidate for that type of job. But I'd say for a data science role, and even I'd say for an analyst role, I would hope that, you know, you have some sort of programming experience, whether that be R, SQL, or Python, or even SAS. I'd say that, you know, that would kind of be a prerequisite.
I want to hop in and ask oh, sorry, Jessica. No, you go.
Thanks. I want to build on what Allison and John both said. So I come from the geospatial side. I work a lot on NASA grants. I do like supercomputing on NASA servers. And so a lot of the stuff is done, you know, on servers that sit at NASA Goddard Space Flight Center. I don't necessarily do it on campus, but I'm trying to teach students essentially what Allison was talking about, like how to build a workflow, to know how to use a sandbox. And NASA has really transitioned to Jupyter, but still maintains, unfortunately, a lot of MATLAB. And so as much as I wish I could forget the MATLAB I learned as a graduate student, I still have to use it. And SQL. So Derek, I was really happy when you said SQL, because I mean, honestly, if we want to, you know, have geospatial graduates, the master's or PhD level, they have to know SQL because we're just using petabytes and petabytes of satellite data. I mean, it's, you know, they just have to. In the past, I have tried hiring in professionals, so people who are consultants or who work for startups, insurance companies, who have graduate degrees, but do geospatial science, to teach SQL or to teach Jupyter. And we've actually had an issue with students complaining that the classes are not relevant. And this semester, we took a little bit of time to interrogate that. And what we found was that the job ads for internships or for entry-level jobs often don't list SQL or list Jupyter or list the ability to do workflows. But when we reached out to our recent grads, so within the last 2 years, all of them said that they had learned SQL on the job between, graduating and the last 2 years. And so I feel like maybe we also have a communication issue, and I don't think that it's, well, as much as I would just like to put in a module on SQL when I teach the open source geospatial coding, that's not really enough. Like, they actually do need to take a class. It's kind of an open-ended question. Like, we teach them RStudio, we teach them Python, they learn JavaScript for Google Earth Engine, like they're learning a lot of different languages. Yeah. And then, but a lot of smaller, consulting shops still use Esri, and ESRI, like they just use ArcPy, and that's just not good. Like, it's not good for data processing. So I think we feel like we're caught between a rock and a hard place. We know that our recent grads need these skills, but a lot of the job ads say they need to know proprietary things. And so there is this, like, how do we make them, how do we innovate our curriculum, like Allison is saying, but how do we make sure they can get the jobs when they apply for them? So they have to know both. Yeah, I'd like to hear what everybody has to say about that. I'm sure it's an ongoing problem.
I really want to mention something about this. I think the communication problem you say is correct, because we really do not define what do you mean by knowing technology. When somebody says, I do know Python, well, it can mean a million different things. So I do think, that's kind of from the university point of view and the job market, also the people who write the job descriptions, I would suggest they should send like a scale. We want you to be 3 out of 5 in Python, and then attached to the job description, we have explained what does that mean. So 3 perhaps would be the person is comfortable using open source packages end to end. And maybe I think Google have a certain scale like this, which 0 means I've never heard this technology before, and 10 is I invented it, and everything in between. So, I really do think that from both sides, we should really be defining what do you mean I know this technology, really the context, what can you do with this? When you say JavaScript, does it mean jQuery, or can we build like whole e-commerce websites? So it's very, so I think that's the communication problem, kind of defining the different skill levels of people from both sides.
Yeah, I would speak from personal experience there, and coming out of undergrad. It was during a recession. I spent a year interviewing, and any given position, I was terrified of these interviews because I had no idea what they were going to ask. Like, they would say basic knowledge of statistics, and that could mean anything. Yeah, exactly. And these languages, and so I just bombed interview after interview. Like, it was a real learning experience, and it forced me into grad school, which was fine. Like, after I had a master's degree, suddenly people wanted to interview me. The recession was over. It was a really painful experience coming out of college. And so I really feel for folks who are coming out of these programs and maybe feeling unprepared, but I don't have a good solution to that. The field is moving so fast. There's so much you could cover. I would make a pitch, especially since I have lived in DC for many years, and I'm often invited to these NASA data days. And even within, like, I get to sit through their whole afternoon of internal presentations, and they just have these different groups stand up and they're arguing for, like, we should be on Google Cloud, we should be on AWS because of that. And even internally, they have so many differing opinions about what
and how to access AWS has become this internal NASA nightmare. Yeah, exactly.
And so I don't see I mean, maybe somebody smarter than me that can come up with a solution for this, but like just knowing exactly what, from this perspective, the churn that's happening technology wise within NASA, I assume that it's happening all over the place.
Yeah.
I just want to really add one more thing here is when I became a data scientist, I looked at the job description, I was scared, but then I thought to myself, will I get the job done or will I be fired? I mean, can I be just barely above being fired, really honestly to that level? And I think if you can instill in the students the confidence, then I think that comes from end-to-end practical portfolio type of projects. They know I can handle it. I'm able to create an analysis end-to-end and maybe deploy something. And then if you do it once, you kind of have this feeling, I kind of manage the job if I get it, So it's kind of to have this confidence, because I did have the confidence. I thought, whatever they tell me to do, I somehow manage to do it, Maybe barely, but I will, Yeah.
That confidence is like so key.
And that's good. I don't know if this is helpful or not, and I don't necessarily have any real understanding of the technologies in your world, but I'll give you an example in business. And I think, and I want to be cautious about what I say, because I don't want to sound like this is elitist at all, but I think in our program, we have similar things with our business students, particularly at the undergraduate level, but also at the master's level. We're finding with our master's cohort, we'll have students will go and they'll interview for a job, and the ad will be written in such a way that they think it's going to be sort of this really nice high level, analyst or data science role. And they get in there and they go through several rounds of interviews, and they find out that at the end of the process that they're essentially going to be an Excel jockey, right? That the company uses nothing more. And I think, Katie, I think one of your former employees ended up in a situation where instead of doing like really good data science work, they're doing Excel work. And I think what we have done and what we work to do in our classes is to train them on good practice and why reproducibility is important, and why, this is a different level and these are the technologies that are important. And they're maybe in most cases better able to sort of suss out the companies that are a little bit more advanced and in fitting with their skill sets. And some students want to go into the Excel jockey jobs. I mean, that's a great fit for them. And they're perfectly happy doing pivot tables for, their start. And then there's others that it's a terrible fit and they need to be doing something at a higher level. And because there's people on all levels of the spectrum in our world. And I don't know, maybe that's helpful.
Yeah, we have a similar term. We don't call them Excel jockeys. I've been laughing since someone mentioned that at the beginning of the board meeting, but we call them pixel pushers.
Yeah.
When they just like move around, individual satellite images.
John calls it the point and click, drag and drop stuff. It's kind of the same thing. It's just not, it's kind of a low end way to, you can get the job done.
I do think that most Miami programs, because I'm not in the school business, like Allison, John Baylor and I are in the same College of Arts and Science. I think Miami overall does a really good job with students doing service learning courses. Our advanced geospatial classes all have service learning clients, so they do professional deliverables for professional clients. So they know how to do that. I think our students feel a little overwhelmed by the amount of data science and coding that they need if they want these more elite jobs that Allison's talking about. When they're hoping that they can just go in and be like the only person who knows GIS. I don't know. It makes me think like one of the opportunities of Cads could be one of the semester long projects could focus on SQL deliverable. SQL is so important, or just for large database management is so important. But they want to do shiny apps, or they want to make Jupyter a page, Jupyter projects to share or something, or GitHub repositories, which are all important, but there's still just a lot of high-end database management. But anyway, I would appreciate any feedback on that, because geospatial is we're part of data science, but we tend to maintain our own silo in a kind of a way, and you have to be an expert in something else plus geospatial and data science. Like I'm an expert in fire and food security, like wildfires. So like I spend a lot of my time thinking about things that have nothing to do with data, but I have to like use the data to interrogate that natural process essentially. And so I think our students feel overwhelmed, but they need these skills at the same time to do that, this 21st century job in climate science, essentially. Anyway, thanks. I really appreciate this discussion and not debate. Actually, it's nice to see a discussion. Yeah.
I actually wrote several things down. So I had written down SQL earlier, but that is probably something we need to explore. We just launched this semester an R boot camp. So like teaching some of the fundamentals of R and a Python. We're going to reintroduce that again next semester. But then perhaps the next thing we need to develop is around the SQL side of things. How can we help build up the foundational level skills there? And another couple of things, Jessica, on your point, and it made me think about just how we can connect all of these experts, I think, on this panel and across this meeting here. One of the things that Amy helped partner with the Career Center this semester was a telling your technical story. So actually answering some of the stuff that Kelly said, which was, when they ask questions about statistics or foundational statistics, how do you answer some of these questions? How do you tell that story? That was what we were hoping to help. We had industry professionals signed up to help provide guidance and support for students to know how to communicate and answer those questions. So we need to really push students to recognize how important that is. If you can't talk about it, you aren't going to get the job. And then another thing that Amy will talk a bit about in a little bit is our sessions around between love and honor. I think it would be a really great opportunity for us to have perhaps one of you four or all four of you again do a similar conversation, but for students, where you're in here talking about your experiences and how it's not just an either or, it's an and plus this, plus this, plus this, and that you don't have to necessarily know them all going in, but it's a combination that you need in order to get that first job, and then you start learning on the job. So that might help a little bit as well, Jessica. The problem, though, that we run into, I think from not Cads, perhaps it's collective across the university, is how do we get the word out? And then how do we make sure students understand the importance of attending and hearing, because it is valuable for their long-term career goals. So just some thoughts that I had. I took us off the discussion, but I wanted to make sure that everyone knew. I think we've had some really valuable things come out of this, actions we can take.
Thanks, Sandy.
I agree, Sandy. And I think also some of the perspective that they have of bringing solutions into production and deployment. I mean, that's the piece that really is missing, I think, for us at the university, because we don't ever do that. I mean, and you guys all remember when you were in university and you didn't, maybe you did, maybe you went to a better school, but we haven't figured out a way, or at least I haven't. I don't know, maybe you have Jessica, maybe you have John. I haven't figured out a way to mimic that here in the university setting.
I think it's easier with my grad students because I have funded deliverables or professional deployment of data science tools and products that have to get done, but not at the undergraduate level. And that's where there's more of a demand, if that makes sense. Like the graduate students are really kind of specializing in something, but the undergrads want to learn it, but I don't know how to do that, Allison. So I guess I'm in the same boat as you.
I'd like to ask another question, if I may. I'm not suggesting that any of the organizations that are on this call are moving down this path, but I will admit that over the last several months, actually, I've been contacted by former colleagues, just people within my network, reaching out for advice or asking questions around this question of the tools that I know. My company is moving away from them. They said I can no longer use them and I can only use, like they're leaving R and we're moving towards Python. And that's the only language that us as an organization are going to know. What is your reaction? What advice would you give to an organization that might be moving away from multilingual to single language only? I've been in organizations where they were only one language, and then 5 years down the road, they said, that was the wrong thing to do. We should have we should have been allowing people to use the languages that make sense. So what kind of advice might you offer to people who are in a situation where that's what's happening and they want to, this is going to fight back, but they don't know how to do that in the most respectful, professional way?
I think somebody in the call already mentioned that. Unfortunately, I think organizations are like humans and they're motivated by negative things more easily. So in my case, I would tell them you won't be able to hire the best people. And I think that's such a big, I think somebody mentioned today early in the call, it's such a big negative. If you cut off one language, you cut off half of the people. and nobody can afford that right now. So I think maybe that's the first thing that comes to me.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that sounds like if you're trying to use Excel, but you're not allowed to use half the functions that are in there, like it seems like you're limiting yourself for an arbitrary reason. So I think, at least for us at Amend, the emphasis has been on setting up not rules, but I guess guidelines on when to use either one, and then more training on the different packages and use cases of when R or Python is better for certain use cases.
Yeah, I would ask questions versus trying to convince them. That's usually not productive. I would ask them why. Why did you move away from one or the other? Why do you need both? And try to, I feel like usually when you start to try to dive into the details and solicit specific examples, it can rock the foundation a little bit. And that's probably your more of like a Socratic approach. There's probably your best chance of highlighting the flimsy rationale versus, trying to, just lecture them on the ways in which they're doing something is suboptimal. I would just poke at why. I know we used to do that sometimes in consulting when there was a push for using Python versus R, and we felt strongly that R was the right use case, or there was a push for using like some brand new repo out that was the latest and greatest, that was really not stable yet, but they thought it would be the best solution for the problem, and it turns out something really simple was useful. It would just, be about questioning that and showing them examples of the contrary.
Yeah, I think proof of concepts and demonstrating why both languages are important to you is really critical. But even then, it can be really difficult because lots of these organizations I work with have resource constrained IT departments. And it comes down to when you're building shared analytic infrastructure, having an IT group that's comfortable and willing to support multiple or open source languages can be a tough sell. And so you've got to get them comfortable. You've got to do the legwork. You've got to make them know where the bounds are and set up like solutions and tooling around validation and auditing so that you stay in compliance, whatever that means to you in your specific industry. And different industries have different levels of tolerance for that. And so at our studio, we do a lot of legwork in trying to help folks advocate within their organizations for getting the best tools that they need, whatever those are or happen to be. But it's definitely a challenge.
Any other questions that any participants have for our panel? I know, Allison, you said you had a lot too, so feel free to ask any other questions. I have some, but most of you guys, you answered them as we went, so I don't even need to ask most of them.
I have a question. What is your opinion? What is your opinion on dashboards?
Can you define what you mean by dashboard?
I mean kind of the plug and play dashboards that have become so common throughout the COVID period, when they, like using dots to represent population size, which is not intuitive, and raw, trying to show raw numbers as line graphs or pivot tables without consideration of color blindness or UX or yeah. Dashboards. Is this actually something that people use and clients want, or is this just people on Twitter trying to produce something?
I mean, in our case, for my company, with our European clients, all the time there's dashboards, and that they want it. I mean, for anything you need a dashboard, and in my opinion, it's super dangerous because it's just kind of the end result of a black box normally, and the clients don't see what you do there. So it's much harder than people think. That's what I would say. Yeah.
We use, I don't know if it's dashboard as defined as what you're just saying, but we definitely use reports and dashboards for a lot of our clients. And I think the goal of them is to direct them to what the exceptions and the outliers are, and make sure we're directing and guiding action all based off certain metrics like red, green, yellow, up or down, which operation is not doing so well today. I do think they are important to summarize and direct people to focusing on certain parts of the business. To your point around, certain color codes or style, that's probably a debate you could have, but I think dashboards are definitely helpful for summarizing and pointing people to the right actions.
I think it depends on, again, the problem. Like, is this more in the data science space or the analytics space? I think just like with the data science problem, before you go building a dashboard, trying to figure out like what question is this going to answer, who's the end user, what problem am I trying to solve, versus just reporting. Because I think dashboards have a great use case for, kind of repeatable insights and also reporting delivery, just on kind of the status quo, what is. But I think they run a trap of kind of being over flooded, such that you've got multiple different assets, or disconnected from the end user's needs in a way such that they might make sense to the builder, but they didn't really answer the end user's question. So those are some things to look out for. I think for sure when you're in more of a delivery role in that setting and you're not using something like Tableau, you're using something like Shiny that has a lot more power and flexibility, but can be more time consuming to build. I think, and also with any dashboard tool, you definitely run the risk of just tweaking it to death. When people can see the end output versus a model, they're like, oh, I want this, move this button here. And it's actually a ton of work behind the scenes. So I think you always kind of have to interrogate like the why. Why are we doing this? And if there's not a good, quick answer to that, it might be a pretty low priority. So I think there's a time and a place for them, and they still have a big role in the landscape. But I think just like with data science problems, it's really important not to jump in too quickly to just building without understanding what you're doing.
Yeah, you're essentially building a product for someone, right? So you need to know some basic concepts around like feature discovery, like what problem you're going to solve, and what is the how can you get really targeted in building a solution that solves that particular problem. Like Katie mentioned, we advocate at our studio for building dashboards that allow stakeholders to drill down. So that's often really important to the problem. Like at a service level, what are you trying to measure or look at? But how can you drill further down and continue to ask why? And those dashboards can get like wildly, like a little bit too detailed, a little bit too out of control too. So constraining that is important. But I think dashboards can be really useful. I like the thought leadership that Etsy has put out around what they measure and monitor and why, and how overboard they get with that, just because they have a culture of building and measuring things even that haven't started moving yet. And that's really interesting to me, like how far can you push it versus like how much energy do you want to invest in, and how important is measuring things and delivering interfaces for your stakeholders to view and monitor what's happening inside of the business. So they can go very wrong and they can go very right. And I've seen it done both ways. Yeah.
Jessica, we were approached to help build a dashboard for an area part on campus. And we dug in and started asking questions, how is this going to be used? And I quickly realized that they actually didn't need a dashboard. They needed a decision tree almost. Really, it wasn't even like mathematical statistical decision tree. It was really just a set of rules. If this, then do this, then do this, then do this. But in their mind, it's this dashboard, and they keep saying dashboard in our meetings. And then I finally got them to the point, like, no, you're right. Yeah, Tim, that's exactly what I need, Sandy. That's exactly what I need, is this list of things. But in their mind, they thought, well, I need to have these visuals to tell me this thing, which would then lead me to this next visual that tells me this other thing. And I said, well, we'll get to that point. But in the end, the product you need is really just a list of questions to ask yourself. Are these things true? And if so, what next? What should I do next? And that's to Katie's point of asking why and how do you plan to use it?
And I think I just want to add one thing, one piece to the discussion is when you're building a dashboard, and everybody that's ever built one knows this, the data quality is critical, because if you start to roll data up and drill down into the data, when you have mistakes in your data, it just, it creates all sorts of issues. And I don't remember who it was that said black box. I think it was Boyan. that becomes a problem as people start to question the results of the dashboard. And so I like things that are done in R Shiny or something where you can actually go back and trace back the decisions that were made, because I think that's a real challenge with using dashboards in an organization. And sometimes people build them and then they get frustrated because the workforce won't accept them because of data quality issues, and because a dashboard is what it is. I mean, you make decisions along the way, you roll up data along the way, and then you get results. And if the results don't make sense, it's probably because the data was either wrong or you made a decision that didn't reflect what the user wanted it to be. So so I think care has to be taken to make sure they're transparent. That's all.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, if there aren't any more questions for our panelists, I'd like to say thank you. Thank you, Boyan, Derek, Kelly, and Katie. It was a very insightful conversation. I really enjoyed this a lot. I think everyone did. A lot of good discussion was happening. So thank you so much, guys. I'll probably be in touch about other opportunities. I think this could be great.
Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
For those of you who are able to stick around, if you can, we'd like to go through. I'm going to turn it over to Amy now, and she'll walk us through the successes of this past year.
Yay! All right, let me go ahead and share my screen. Maybe. Get it off my email here. Thanks everyone for joining us this afternoon. I hope everyone found that valuable. I just certainly did. I'm always learning here at Cads every day. All right, so we already went through some of this, so I'm going to skip over some of these slides, and we're going to do a little bit of our Cads year in review. Our focus this year really was collaborate, educate, innovate, and we surrounded everything around that slogan that we've come up with for ourselves. We just wanted to say thank you for the continued support of our Cads sponsors, so Cardinal Health, Cleveland Clinic, FIS, EY, and Fifth Third Bank. You all have been our rocks in being able to support our events and programming. We definitely appreciate all of your support. One thing that everyone always loves to find out more about are our lovely interns that we have working on all of these things here at Cads. We've got project interns, we've got marketing interns that are helping with our social media campaigns and events across campus. And this year we hired technical interns to help work on some projects with some different groups across campus and help run our R and coding boot camps and R and Python coding boot camps and things like that. So we sent out a little survey to them and had them respond to some questions that we put in, some fun ones here. So a lot of our students talk about their projects in interviews. So we know that they're talking about the skills that they've learned and all of these ideas and growth that they've made throughout the year. We've had, I won't go through all of these, but we've had 50% of our interns have worked with us for more than one semester, so they keep coming back for these learning opportunities. Some of the things that the interns have said in their survey, so I didn't put these on a slide, but I copying them down to mention to you all is, so some of the, we asked them what their favorite thing was about Cads, and some of the things that the students came back and said. One was the work environment that promotes creativity and innovation. Something that when Sandy was working on getting us into this new space was this idea of promoting a collaborative environment, which obviously some of you were part of the original CAD space, and we certainly had that with the whiteboard walls and things. And now we've been able to expand on that and provide this sort of this innovative space where they've got tables to work at and whiteboard walls to draw on and big screens to display their information and things. So we've taken pride in helping promote that environment. Another thing was, I love how it is an opportunity to take what I am learning in the classroom and apply it to a meaningful situation. And obviously that's the most important thing, is that they're being able to apply what they're learning into real life work environment. Cads is a great collaborative environment. Not only do I get hands-on experience with the material I've learned in my classes, but I also get to bounce ideas and insights off of team members and even other interns in the lab. So that just goes back to the, this space where we're able to grow and learn. Yeah. So one of the most important things you've learned from Cads has taught me how to be successful in a client-centered environment. I've learned to make the most of conversations with clients and focus on creating a product that meets the client's needs. And another one that sort of goes along that line was how to effectively communicate results in a meaningful context. So for our interns who have worked on projects for some of our corporate sponsors here on this call, really thank you for that and providing that opportunity to our students. Any questions about any of that? No. We have increased our experiential learning projects here at Cads by 50% from last year. So we've sort of grown in the amount of projects that we can offer these students. So we're having projects from our corporate sponsors, and we have also been actively seeking out opportunities across Miami's campus and to help other departments with their problems and create solutions for them. So we worked on a project for Miami Advancement this year. We actually worked on 2 projects for them. We were able to work with the Miami Center here at Miami. And we also have a collaboration going now between Cads and the Department of Sport Leadership and Management, where we're able to offer analytics positions to some of the athletic teams and support the athletic teams here on campus in their analytics needs. So just this spring semester, we worked with the field hockey team and softball team, and we know how well they did. So I'm just saying, we probably had something to do with that. We also had an uptick of 20% increase in number of interns because of that as well. So here's our little density plot that we've been putting out for you here the last couple of semesters to show our growth. The student engagement with Cads, we've reached our highest engagement since Cads inception, and we were able to interact with 352 students this year, which was amazing. We had several new programs and events this year. Largely, again, goes back to all of that sponsor support that we are able to offer all of these new programs and events. Students are starting to talk about these things. They're going to classes, they're talking to their friends, they're going to their student groups, and more people are coming and saying, I heard about Cads from this person in my class, or I heard about Cads from this professor, and things like that. So we're really helping spread the word and gain interest in everything we've got going on, and then we're able to offer more of these things. We had Data Fest this year, which we weren't able to offer last year, so that's great. We had 17 teams and 17 students participate from Miami, Worcester, and Bowling Green University this year.
71 students. She said 17, but that was 71 students.
17 teams and 71 students. That would be kind of sad if we only had 17 teams of 1 student each. Another really successful event that we launched this year that I wanted to talk to some of our sponsors about is Between Love and Honor. So this is sort of this intimate interview sort of session that we started having, and we're going to have these again next year. So it's an opportunity for people to give advice, tips and tricks, data science techniques, and just have this a little bit smaller of a setting, time to get to know these students and for them to ask questions of industry professionals and things like that. They turned out to be really fun for everyone involved. And Sandy and I are starting to reach out to some of you to get these on the calendar for next year. So if you're interested in hosting a Between Love and Honor session, we'd be happy to hear from you as we start planning out next year. All right. Oh, this is Kevin. So any questions on some of the things that we had done from that we have done this year? I did want to say that last year wasn't really a good, what am I trying to say? Sort of
Last year wasn't a representative year of what a typical
Thank you.
CADS environment would look like, or CADS engagement year would look like. So we didn't do any of our benchmarking against 2019-20 just because of COVID. But I will say that we were really proud of the numbers that we were able to hit last year, despite the fact that we had to cancel our biggest event Data Fest. So yeah, that's why we compared everything to 2018-19.
Absolutely. So we did have 41% growth from 2018-19 school year to this year, 2020 to 2021. So with that, some highlights from this year. I'm going to turn it over to Kevin, which is one of the biggest highlights of the year, and our corporate analytics training program that Kevin's going to talk about.
All right, thanks, Amy. I appreciate that. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Kevin Park. I'm the Associate Director for Cads Analytics. I recently joined Miami last October, so I'm hitting my 6-month mark here with Miami, and I'm really glad to be talking with you all today and providing some updates for our corporate analytics training program, which we were able to launch this year, which is really exciting. So as professional development in analytics is a major initiative for CADS, we are really excited to lead and offer our first course of Stats 101 to our pilot partner, which was the Cleveland Clinic. And we kicked off this course on March 1st of this year, and we ran a 7-week program for 24 Cleveland Clinic employees. And since we were not able to deliver the trainings in person as we wanted and planned, we actually delivered our training in a hybrid fashion where participants from the Cleveland Clinic completed learning both online, asynchronously, and also engaged in a live synchronous session over Zoom, where we got to meet together and reinforce those analytical skills that they were learning across the 7 weeks. So our program will continue to offer the Stats 101 and Data Science 101 course, as you see here, with more cohorts with the Cleveland Clinic, and also onto our professional education platform here at Miami Online. And our plan is to continue to develop the portfolio of courses that we plan to offer in our analytics pipeline, including a data storytelling course that we're partnering with actually a third-party organization called Untitled Chapter. So if there are any questions about the corporate analytics training program, I'm more than happy to address them. So feel free to reach out to me, my email that's on the slide here as well. But before I end, I wanted to provide an opportunity. I believe Mike Lewis is on the call, and if you wanted to share any quick thoughts about the experience of so far that we've had working with you as a pilot partner and also offering the Stats 101 training course with our pilot cohort, we'd be happy to hear your thoughts, Mike.
Oh yeah, sure, no problem.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to say the team has done a great job. Kevin has been able to produce the content that we've asked for, and what you're kind of seeing in these classes are, the goal for the clinic is upskilling the workforce. It's not sending them back to school necessarily. So we're not really focused on the math behind all these different concepts. It's really, can you apply them? The software today, as you know, can do all the math for you pretty easily. So our biggest, objective here was to work with Kevin, and I had my team of data scientists working with Kevin on kind of reviewing slides, making sure the material was appropriate and could be easily digested in different learning environments. Like Kevin said, we plan to do this, in person, but we hope to get to that someday soon. But Kevin and the folks that have been working on this from Miami have been awesome partners in this. I think we've had great success. My folks that have kind of gone through the pilot have said nothing but great things about the content. They've learned a lot. They've been able to think about how they use it in their day-to-day work. We're looking to kick off our kind of data science 101 class here in the next month or so, and kind of have those people that complete the Stats 101 kind of graduate and do the data science 101. And again, it's not about, this is really about upskilling our business analysts or financial analysts or folks that are going to be interacting with our enterprise analytics division. So them really understanding the concepts and how to use it, what's appropriate, was really important for this. So again, I want to thank Sandy and Amy and Kevin for all the hard work. It's been about probably about a year in the making to get all the kinks and everything worked out, but we got one going, and it's been a great success. So thanks again.
Thank you, Mike.
It's been fun, Mike.
Exactly. I was just going to say the same thing, Sandy. Thank you so much. We're really glad to hear that our program has been very helpful. And so we enjoy working with you and we're excited to continue working with you on this. So thank you. All right, I can give it back to you, Amy. I think that's all I had for today.
Awesome. Thanks, Kevin. All right, so we are going to look ahead into some things for next year, 2021/2022. It's hard to believe how fast the years are flying. Some of the things I will be reaching out very soon to some of you who are on deck for a project in the fall. Just a reminder, over here on the left-hand side is a project timeline. So these project timelines, I start working on these and you start working on your business problem pretty much now. And I'll start reaching out in sort of June and July if you're up for a project for the fall, and we'll start talking about the scope in terms of that. And we have to get that data on board so that we can start those projects with the students by the end of August when the students come back on campus, and then working on hiring the faculty advisor and the student intern team to meet your needs for the semester-long project that will end in early December. And then the process repeats itself for those of you who are on deck for a spring project, where I start reaching out in early November-ish for a spring project, which seems crazy when you haven't had your Thanksgiving dinner yet, and we're talking about spring projects on deck. But some of the other events that we'll be having next year are over here listed on the side. So we've got lots going on that we're already planning for. So if any of these pique your interest that you'd like to be involved with, please contact me or Sandy or Kevin. Any one of us will answer your questions. If you'd like to be part of any of these, one of the things that we'll be gearing up for quite quickly after the semester before the semester even starts is resume review, which many of you have been involved with in the past. And we will be having a new Data Palooza event in the fall, which will happen sometime in maybe October-ish timeframe, but we are hoping to plan this as sort of a teaser mini data fest where the students will get a problem to work on over the course of a couple of weeks and be able to have mentor sessions and things like that on this data set, and sort of prepare them a little bit for that weekend long hackathon that happens in the spring. So lots going on next year, and please reach out if you're interested in helping out with any of those.
We should probably iterate, though, that that Data Palooza idea is actually a sponsored event through Amend Consulting. So that would be on their proprietary data that they would be providing for that type of an event. So I'm not sure how much we'd be able to have support on that.
That's true.
Since it would be a specific organization, but the rest of it, the more support we have from industry partners, the better. The students really enjoy that.
Yeah. Thanks.
The last thing that we wanted to talk about today was just the fact that it's all of you that helps and makes us successful, our partnerships and engagement with the faculty on campus, and with each one of you, the board members. And bye, Jessica. She's leaving to pick up her preschooler. But the more that we engage with all of you and your organizations, and we incorporate your employees into what we're offering for the students, the better those events tend to be. We sought your feedback out over the last couple of years, and we have reformatted the way we deliver these board meetings. And we make sure that we bring in of the moment trends so that you're learning from those opportunities and those experiences, or what's happening around the world and within other organizations. We'd like to learn more. Is this resonating? Are there other things that we could change for our board meetings and the board participations? I know there are only a couple of you left on this call, so perhaps it's not the right moment to have this a more of a deeper dive discussion on these things. But if you'd like to think about them and get back to us, that would be great as well. We'd also like to learn about what are some wins, what are some successes that you seem to be having with other universities, and how can we build upon that? One of the things that Kroger has been doing, they have these tech days, and they started it with UC, and they invited UC students. It was all virtual, and they have a large room where they do a presentation about Kroger, and then they have breakout sessions where you can go learn about different parts of the organization and how they're deploying tech across. It's not just a grocery store, basically, is what they're trying to teach students, that they're also this R&D and a technical organization. And so students are learning from these different sessions. We had a conversation with Kroger, and the opportunity came up for us to participate in those as well. So we invited Miami students. They were able to broaden that. What are things like that that are happening and working for you with other universities? And how can we either help participate or collaborate with those other universities, or try to replicate that here at Miami? And then we're always open to other ideas, thoughts, and comments. So Derek messaged me and said that he teaches a SQL workshop at MIT. And he said, hey, I'd love to talk about how I could do that at Miami. So even things like that, I'd love to have more of those types of conversations with you or anyone else in your organization. So again, I recognize that there aren't as many people still left who were able to stick around until now. If you'd like to discuss any of these things now, great. Or if you'd like to follow up with us and we can have a more in-depth conversation with you at a later date. We will try. We're probably not going to be able to travel much. I don't think no one's allowing visitors, but we'll have connections with you all over the summer again, just to get a sense for how you thought the semesters went or how the year went, and what other ways that we can help to drive success for you all across the university too. So if anyone has anything they'd like to comment on any of these questions, great. Or we can follow up at a later date. I take silence to mean that everyone is like, yay, it's time to head off. So that is totally fine. It is a crazy week. I see Mike's on, and Mike, you presented at the CDO conference too. So you're probably a bit wiped out right now.
Yeah, I think I said everything fell on May 5th for me for some reason. So yeah, I've been kind of in and out of meetings, but I was on this call earlier listening to some of the R, Python, then I had to drop and came back in.
Okay, great.
And we put tons of things on your calendar today too. Sorry, Mike.
It's all good. All good.
We appreciate just the support from all of you that we've had over the last several years. It's been a real pleasure to get to know all of you, even as like Mike, you're in now for Prava, but it's been a great opportunity to get to know you all and get each of your organizations more invested in CAD. So thank you. We will be following up with you all shortly, and we'll give you guys your time back and get some other stuff done. Maybe relax a little bit, Mike, before your next big meeting, I'm sure.
Yeah. Great. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks. See you later.
Bye. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.